Hello, my name's Ed, and well, you might have noticed a little change on the channel name, because by the time this goes up you'll probably have noticed that the channel's now called Ed Space rather than Ed of History. Now a lot of the stuff with Ed of History on it will keep that name, but well, I felt like there needed to be something done a bit different. Partly, of course, for views, I'll be honest. Because, unfortunately, when you type into YouTube Ed of History, it'll often ask you, did you mean end of history? You know, it's a good pun. I mean, Ed of History, you know, is a good pun. Because the phrase head of history. But I forgot about Francis Fukuyama's end of history. However, there's another reason as well. Thing is, there are a lot of channels talking about history. You know, you've got woolly jumper enthusiasts talking about pretty much anything they'd like to talk about. Nice looking Italian guys, following the facts wherever they lead. Need reenactors looking at military history through a social and such lens. I mean, you know, you can even find out what the Witchfinder General thinks about Arsenal, about subreddits. You know, the history community in YouTube is pretty diverse and pretty expert. They got lots of different fields. They know what they're doing, and I'm just trying to think. So I'm also trying to, you know, expand my content out, because it feels like there's stuff to talk about that I can talk about. There will still be history stuff, but perhaps a bit more. A bit more that I can think of, that I can talk about, and now that it doesn't feel like it's just ripping off someone else's video. But either way, I wanted to mark this occasion. Because, you see, there was something I was planning to do, because back in 2019 I started this channel. Didn't have an icon, logo for it. But, well, there was a video I put up, and, you know, one thing I really wish I hadn't done now was take it down, in a way. Because, yes, it contained information about going to polling, because it was specifically to try and get people to come out and vote, and I'm sorry to Jay Foreman for not putting it back up. But, and one of the things I noticed about the video was that there was a bit of a fatal flaw in its premise. An issue I hadn't addressed. Now, I'd put this video back a bit because I had planned to make something like this in January, as a sort of inauguration gift for President Biden. But the Capitol riots made me think, that's probably not a good time. So now, we're gonna watch that video. But stick around afterwards, because I'm going to address its fatal flaw.
I thank you all for coming, and I bid you welcome to my channel and this first chat by the fire, and apologies for my English language ability if at all sub-performing. While I wasn't intending this video to be the first on this channel, I also wasn't anticipating a general election to be called later this month. And while Jay Foreman has already done an excellent video on why you should vote, my video here will discuss how people are involved in historical events, with a parallel point about going out to cast a ballot being a useful entry point to the topic. Something we can all relate to. So let us begin with one of those big questions of history. What makes the course of events happen? Well, there are a few answers. One theory is that of the great person thesis, sometimes called the great man thesis. This takes the view that history is, either entirely or predominantly, shaped by the decisions of powerful individuals, the kings and queens, generals, politicians, entrepreneurs, activists, explorers, scientists and such. Names like Julius Caesar, Wu Zetian, Elizabeth I, Christopher Columbus, Rosa Parks, Alexander Graham Bell, William Shakespeare, Tokugawa, Saladin, Marie Curie, and more. All these seen as the movers and shakers whose decisions shape the direction of history. There are those who question how far history is shaped by these people, perhaps contending that these individuals were more reacting to, rather than driving, the course of history. This approach is quite varied. But it is hard to come up with a single all-encompassing name. Instead, history being shaped by forces of economy, society, geography, ideas, others. These also being divisible by ideas of history as progressing towards an end, or moving in a cycle. So perhaps you might be wondering what you can do to be a part of history. Well, let me tell you a story. A Christmas story from not too long ago. The sound of artillery echoes all around, to the point where it's an ever-present dread. The next shell could bury you. Even if you're not hit, the explosion could shift the earth around you. It's cold. Mud is another ever-present feature. The occasional shot rings out. You're cold and tired. Every passing moment could be your last, and you need to be on alert. An attack could come at any moment. Chances are you've lost friends. Maybe worst of all, it's coming up to Christmas. That same Christmas, they said the war would be over by. And that Christmas, it's Christmas Eve, December the 24th, 1914. And the war is anything but over. Then, as the night draws on, a different sound floats across no man's land. A sound that you may never have heard before, but is nonetheless familiar. As morning breaks, the guns were silent. Trepidation sets in. Normally the guns stop when an attack is about to start. And if it's not you, then it's them. You man the parapet and look around. Nothing. Across the front, the soldiers took those steps out into no man's land, not knowing what was in store for them. Perhaps to be shot by the enemy, or even by their own side, since fraternization with the enemy was a court-martial offence punishable by death. But they did not hold back. Across the front, the soldiers on both sides stopped the fighting for Christmas. They came together. No plan had been made at high command, but the decision was taken by individuals at the front line. famously, a football match was played between British and German soldiers. Presents were exchanged and information about the soldiers was shared, as both sides could tell the other about who was missing, killed or wounded. This wasn't a universal event. Some parts of the front didn't stop fighting. Some kept the truce going all the way to New Year. But we see here the coming together of ideas, the common humanity that exists beyond nations and armies, events, the arrival of a celebration in a war-torn region, and people, and the spontaneous desire of the soldiers to grasp a moment of friendship and happiness in the midst of death and destruction modern war had brought upon them. Thus it comes to today. For those eligible to vote in the United Kingdom, on December 12th, you have the power to do something, to make your voice heard and express how you feel about the issues facing this country. It is a gift only you can give. You and you alone. How you take part is up to you. I'm not saying how to vote. Only you can do that. No party's asked me to make this video. I do it merely as a citizen who wants to do his part. Simply by taking part, by voting, even spoiling your paper, you will be noticed. Perhaps you may not feel that your one vote make a difference. Your one vote won't make a difference, perhaps. It doesn't have to be that way, though. After all, as the soldiers on the Western Front took to celebrating Christmas in no man's land, it wasn't planned from my command. It was a decision made in the hearts of the individual soldiers who came, and they came together. So like them, you can make a lasting impact. Together, we can. So, if we return to the question, how does history get shaped? Well, there is no simple answer, much like the issues of today. But don't be disheartened, for while you may be told that you are too small to affect anything, that there is one thing forgotten about the movements of history, the power behind them. As we have seen, history is moved, in the words of the old song, soul by soul and silently. The many people whose names are unknown, but as they came together, to paraphrase the tomb of the unknown soldier in Moscow, their deeds are immortal. Just as those who held firm during the Blitz did, living their lives and doing what they could to hold on to that which was dearest of all. Similarly, in times like these, where people are finding themselves divided and diminished, that is when we must raise our hearts and come together by simply living our lives and casting our ballot on December 12th. Because your vote will matter, whether directly in affecting the outcome of the vote in your constituency, or indirectly in how the parties react to winning you over. Jay Foreman has more details on this, link in the description. Because on December 12th, your vote is a unique gift to give. No one else can tell you how to think or feel. I thank you for your time and hope you cast your vote on December 12th. It was lovely having you here.
Well, everyone, thank you for watching that video with me. And now, as I said, it's time to address the fatal flaw of that video, because you see, there was a point I didn't really address. Because people probably know that they can make a difference, but making a difference by voting. And perhaps probably the biggest thing that might turn someone off voting is the idea that it can feel like you go out to vote, the names change, but everything else stays the same. And in a way, I can see where you're coming from with it. I mean, I used to be a member of a political party. I won't say which one because that wouldn't be fair. But more to the point is that it's not so much about voting, because some of the big changes are what happens beforehand. Because voting alone may not make a difference, but there's a key element to that. Alone. Yes, one person without much money or power and influence might not be able to make much of a difference on their own. But they can organise. Meet with other like-minded people. So let us cast our minds away from the Western Front of 1914 towards 2020. Nearly 106 years later, 1 month shy of that perhaps. And over the Atlantic to, well, to quote Martin Luther King, the red hills of Georgia. And more importantly, how in a way they became not so red. Now, before we proceed, I'm not a Biden fan per se. You know, I like him better than Trump. Even if, to be quite frank, I reckon Bernie Sanders would be the best US president at this current time. But that aside, the point is the campaigning. Overcoming, you know, the grassroots before polling day in Georgia. They went out there. People came together, overcoming the sort of voter, what they called oppression fatigue, and there are sources in the description. You know, people feeling like there's nothing we can do about any of this. And working together, building up a voter base, mobilising the people, they managed to do what pretty much no one expected. And get Georgia to go, Democrat out in the presidential election. Something which is very, very rare. Especially in recent years. And so, well, I'm just going to pause here so I can set up, and we're going to do a little song about that. Well, here goes. Bring the good old bugle, friends, we'll sing another song. Sing it with a spirit that'll start the world along. Sing it as we used to sing, 2.449 mil strong. While we were voting in Georgia. Hoorah, hoorah, we bring the Jubilee. Hoorah, hoorah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea. While never reach the coast. So the angry Trumpites said it was a handsome boast. Had they not forgotten as to reckon with the host? While we were voting in Georgia, hurrah, hurrah, let's bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were voting in Georgia. Shouted when they heard the joyful sound, how the people came together, number all around, how the voters upswell came up swelling from the ground, while we were voting in Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, let's bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were voting in Georgia. There were many Democrats who wept with joyful tears when they saw the state turn blue that had not turned for years. Hardly could they be restrained from breaking forth in cheers, while we were voting in Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, let's bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were voting in Georgia. So we made a thoroughfare for Biden and his train, 60 miles in latitude, 300 to the main. MAGA fled before us, for resistance was in vain, while we were voting in Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, let's bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were voting in Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, let's bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, for those like you and me. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were voting, while we were voting, while we were voting in Georgia. Well, thank you, and hope my singing wasn't that bad, and hope my ukulele playing wasn't that bad either. Well, at least I try and be real with you. So, thank you very much. Welcome to Edspace, and it was lovely having you here.